Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heater, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah Heater, and officially welcome back to 2026 on the Big Brave Business podcast. I've been a little MIA, and I don't normally feel like you need to explain, hey, I came back after a long absence or whatever, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that I literally sell podcasting services and strategic consulting. I am a huge advocate that you should never leave your feet empty in a standard traditional podcast. And if you have to, you shouldn't do it for more than 2 weeks in a row. That's just not good strategy. And here I am doing it. And here's the thing. Sometimes things are just more important than a podcast. I love my podcast and I love this community and I love podcasting. But at the end of the day, it's not that the podcast is not important. It's just that sometimes there's other things that are more important. And truth be told, we were moving. We downsized from a house that my kids lived in and was 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, enough room for 2 young adult men to live in the house, plus sometimes their girlfriends, and me and my husband to work full-time from home. And we downsized to literally half the square footage, and we purged a lot, and it's just the 2 of us now. We're empty nesting. Everybody's grown up and moved out and moving on with their lives, and so it's just the 2 of us. And we do still work full-time from home, so we do still have home offices, but it's just been a huge adjustment. And truly, for 2 weeks, I didn't know where my microphone was. Now, that's just kind of a little bit of an excuse, but the truth is I was doing a lot and there were things to worry about. So that's what I was doing for the past few weeks. Everything is good. Everything is fine. I feel like my business is off to a kick-ass start in 2026. Now, I say that acknowledging that, especially if you live in the United States, things are really hard right now. Collectively, the cultural environment of living in the United States is not super joyful and community oriented and loving and fun. It's scary and it's violent, and yeah, it's really, really hard. People are getting hurt. People are losing their lives. People are losing their livelihoods for speaking up. There's a lot of things that are going on right now that just suck. And it's a really weird dichotomy. This isn't the topic of the podcast today, although probably could be, but I do want to address it, which is when things are draining in the news and on social media, it can make running a business, especially if your business is primarily run online, exhausting. I mean, it's exhausting anyway, but particularly exhausting. And I think that it is totally okay to listen to your body and to listen to your nervous system and to balance, of course, also from an ethics and core values perspective, what, feels most important in that moment. And that being said, we live in a capitalist society and we still need to make money to live. So there's no shade in people doing business as usual. There's also a total understanding for people who feel like they need to step back, slow down, or intentionally want to boycott certain types of productivity, spending, and selling for the sake of their core values and the way that they want to show up to make a difference in the world. All of those truths can be true simultaneously for different people in different days and different hours of the day. And all of those things are reasonable conclusions. So I acknowledge that lots of stuff is horrible. And I think for me personally, and I'm wondering if you can relate to this, I feel like in 2025, I was taking, I'm not going to say I'm not taking things hard right now because I totally do, but I think in 2025, I was really, especially at the beginning, really in disbelief and shock that we were back here again, administration wise. And so much happened so quickly, which of course was intentional, right? But I found myself really feeling like I just didn't have a lot to give my business. And I do feel like Big Brave Business was incredible in 2025. I'm so proud of the conversations that we had and the community with guests. I really, really loved it. That being said, I also batch recorded almost the entire year of episodes at the beginning of the year. So I really went through it over the course of 2025. And I'm not trying to pretend I'm special. I'm trying to say, like, I know a lot of us did. And me too. I'm not immune to that. And I think it's kind of interesting because, as proud as I am of Big Brave Business, I don't know that I would have been able to stay as consistent throughout the whole year if I hadn't batch recorded the way I did, because I did really, really struggle, like so many other people, and maybe you too. And I think that for my actual business, PodFox, which is like I said, a podcast production and strategic consultation company, I did have some new clients that I loved working with and that I learned a lot from, and new clients that I'm still working with that I am still learning from and love working with. I also, I would say, kept the lights on for the most part for PodFox for 2025. I did what I needed to do. I really believe in the business and I really believe in podcasting. And so I wanted to help people and support people and work with the right fit people. And I wasn't super motivated to be, or had the bandwidth to be in a place of scale, 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 grow, grow, grow. But growth looks like different things and growth is not linear. And so I think all of this is really important. So going into the very end of the year during Q4, I came up with this idea for, hey, this was just not the year that we hoped to have. And there's this model that my friend slash client, Sarah, uses. I talked about it a little bit in previous episodes. For her, she calls it, well, she used to call it Coaching Week. Can't remember what she calls it now, but it was originally called Coaching Week. She sells a completely different type of offer off of Coaching Week, but I was listening to her share about her numbers and how she shapes it and what it's like. And I thought, couldn't I do something like this to help people prep for a podcast launch, with the hope that a chunk of people who participate in that podcast launch prep week would then choose to become clients of PodFox. And they'd also be able to form a cohort together because they'd all be going through the launch process at the same time. Whereas traditionally, historically, in PodFox, which I've been open for 6.5 years now, in PodFox, we have worked with people so privately, one-on-one, that they are kind of in a silo with starting their podcast. Now, they have great support from the team, right? From PodFox. We're great at pep talks and we're great at making our clients feel less alone in what they're doing. But wouldn't it be even cooler if they were doing that alongside other PodFox clients at the same time, as they go through the launch process in the first several months of their podcast and get through those really big pain points where most podcasters quit? And so if they could do that with a sense of community, of some kind of cohort that they could exchange ideas with. And I know the term mastermind is a bit of a buzzword that's sort of what does that even mean? But to me, it's community and exchanging of ideas where we can all learn from each other and support each other. And so could we not create that environment and still provide the same wonderful private one-on-one service that we already do? We did the first round in December, and I shared a bit about that going into prep week on this podcast. Obviously, if you are listening to this and you run a business and you've been in business for a while and you're ethically aligned, which is part of why you're listening, then if you have thought about starting a podcast, then you're also my ideal person I would want to work with and support in amplifying your voice through podcasting, or people who might want to start a podcast who would be good fits. So that's part of why I shared it. But I also think it would be fun on this going into this new year of Big Brave Business to share not just great guest conversations, but also to do more solo episodes where I'm able to spend time with you personally, where I can be transparent about my own business, my own leadership, with the decisions that I'm making. And so this new model and experimenting with this new form of launch for my business, it's not like a new form of launching, but it's new to PodFox, if that makes sense. So to share that with you transparently, and then also whatever else is coming up, right? Whatever else is coming up for me, what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, how I'm feeling about business, and to be able to reflect on that with you. So expect some more solo episodes this year. I plan to do that. I hope to do that. Let me know if you enjoy it, spending time with just little old me. And yeah, prep week has been a really fun adventure because in a year that I felt really stalled, and not that I like was trying to get unstalled. Honestly, it was kind of like an intentional stall, like remove the battery from the vehicle and choose not to move it. Like it's fine kind of a situation. And I felt like going to the end of the year, I wanted this injection of like hope and joy and community and optimism and excitement, and to feel like myself again in a year where my mental health was really bad. And again, I say this not to say like I'm special, my mental health was bad. I'm trying to say it in a way that's like, I get it. If you felt that way, me too. So that's kind of the sort of crux behind Podcast Launch Prep Week. And what's been so interesting about it is it was such a cool way to end a hard year that I think it helped propel me into 2026 with this energy of like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that sucks and is stressful in our communities, in the country, in the world, and life keeps going. That's the best way I can think to describe it. Life keeps going, and it kind of has to. I feel like I really could do a whole episode about just this, but I'm going to leave that there. And if you want to explore this topic more, if this is on your mind and your heart too, let's talk about it. Because I shared with you Podcast Launch Prep Week as an idea and what, some of my goals were and what I was excited about and what I was working toward, I wanted to also make sure that I came back to share with you how it actually went and what that means moving forward. And I will say that, like, I'm really proud, just at face value, I'm really proud of how Podcast Launch Prep Week went. I also learned a lot. I do plan to repeat it. In fact, our next round is going to be at the end of February, February 23rd to 27th. I will talk more about that at the end, but we do all definitely have another round going. So if you already know, like, at this moment in time, hey, this is interesting to me, there's a link in the description or the show notes, but also you can go to just podfoxmedia.com and there's a big banner right across the top that says Podcast Launch Prep Week. You can get a lot more information about what it's going to look like, how it's going to be structured, and how to register, all of that. There's a couple of different price points that are available. There's the standard, but there's also VIP. VIP includes hot seat coaching, which was like the favorite part of Podcast Launch Prep Week round 1 in December. So if you're thinking of launching a podcast in 2026, if you want to get started with a podcast, this is a perfect way to plan your launch, to plan your podcast strategy, and to plan your first 6 months of episodes, which is a lot, right? We're going to do all of that in a week plus more, right? And there's hot seat coaching involved in that, and we'll have some guests come in. So there's a lot going on for Podcast Launch Prep Week in those 5 days. And it's only like a 1 to 2 hour commitment per day for those 5 days, Monday through Friday, with replays included. So if that sounds interesting to you, please come check it out and join us. It's, like I said, just podfoxmedia.com. VIP with the hot seat coaching is $299. And then if you want to hold off on the hot seat coaching for now and just do the standard registration, it's $199. And you will have a chance to upgrade to VIP later, as long as there are still spots available, which is just, we'll see how it sells. But anyway, so I definitely plan to do it again. So you can already tell just from that I would consider it a success. And I I really loved it. I really loved it, and I really see a lot of possibility for it. And that being said, we also fell very short of some of our goals. We also exceeded some of our goals. Just as a reminder, I wanted to sell 50 spots in Podcast Launch Prep Week. We sold 15. So stark contrast there. I also wanted to convert at about 40% to become ongoing podcast clients with PodFox. We actually converted at 66%, but I know that a big part, or I can assess that a big part of why that conversion rate was so high is because there were only 15 people, not 50 in the program. So I think statistically, other stats can show us that as that overall number, the reach is bigger, the conversion is probably going to be a smaller percentage. Of course, time will tell. I'll keep you posted. So, just some more numbers to share before I get into like how do you measure whether or not this was a success. I have less than 2,000 followers on any given social media platform. My Instagram, which is where my Instagram is probably where I'm most active. That has just under 1,700 followers. My Threads account has, I think, circa 1,300 followers. I have about 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. These were all places that I was really promoting Podcast Launch Prep Week. And so I have an email list that was stone cold. That is less than 1,000. So I just want to kind of share that I had relatively low reach for how I was selling Podcast Launch Prep Week to begin with. We did dabble with ads, honestly, didn't really have the effect that we were hoping for, but we did dabble with ads. And yeah, that's kind of the overall, I guess, numerical picture of what Podcast Launch Prep Week looked like, what our kind of marketing efforts were, not efforts, but what our marketing landscape looked like, and then, yeah, how it went. I would say, though, that I knew I was going to repeat Podcast Launch Prep Week before it was even over. So I didn't know what the conversion number was going to be. So my measurement of whether or not this was successful was not purely driven on numbers. There's also some other ways, I think, like the way I feel, instinct, that kind of thing, feedback that you're getting, of course. Those are all ways that I measured whether it was successful and whether it's something I want to continue to do. So I asked ChatGPT to give me a couple of questions as if somebody was interviewing me about how I'm measuring the success of prep week and how that can kind of carry over to like measuring the success of anything we're doing in business, any program, any launch, any offer. Like, how do you know if it's successful and what do you do from here? So the first question is the human side of things. How did I feel throughout Podcast Launch Prep Week and what surprised me the most? I loved it. I felt totally fired up. And actually, my team was laughing because I was running the sessions myself primarily. I had some guests come in and there were some kind of panel discussions with PodFox team members. But for the most part, I really was like the MC for the entire and the trainer for the entire week. And I loved it. So my team was laughing and they were sending me messages saying, I can tell how much you love this. I can tell that this is exactly what you love to do. Like this is where you want to be. This is what you want to be doing. And I definitely felt like this was my zone of genius and it is what I'm really good at. It's the kind of thing where you get off one of the calls and instead of feeling depleted, you're like on fire and you're like, I'm so good at my job. That's how I felt all week. And that's part of why I knew this was something that I wanted to repeat, even if it was going to need to look different or whatever, no problem. We're definitely doing this again. We're doing more of this because if this is how I feel, then I know this is what I should be doing in some context, right? It's the same way that I feel when I speak on stage. This is my zone of genius. So that was a big part of it. I knew that I was doing a great job. I didn't have doubts about, do I feel like people got value from that? Do I feel like that was worth the money? Do I feel like, no, I knew. I knew it was good. And that felt really powerful. Yeah, I felt powerful. So I think what surprised me was not any of that, because I've known since I was pretty young that performing is something that I was meant to do. I was a theater kid. I dreamed of speaking on stages basically from the time I saw somebody speak on a stage. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I've had other jobs where I've done training programs and things where I'm like presenting, teaching, training, coaching to a large group. And I knew that, I mean, I've known for years, for decades, that this is what I love. So none of that was surprising. I mean, even doing one-on-one, like, quote unquote, sales calls. We don't really do sales calls in PodFox right now. We do 90-minute strategy sessions for anybody thinking of starting a podcast. And so you actually get like an hour-long strategy session just about your launch. And then we do the sales call part on the end of that if it's a good fit. And we did incorporate some of that material from that 90-minute strategy session for what that we do in lieu of a sales call into podcast launch prep week. So some of the materials very related, because it's about planning starting a podcast, right? So that makes sense. But even when I do those one-on-one strategy sessions, which I don't do them as often anymore because I have a team, so I'm not as often the person who's doing the selling, but when I am on those calls, I feel the same exact way. I get off that feeling like powerful, like I performed, even though it was like a one-on-one call. Yeah, I love it. So none of that surprised me. What did surprise me is going to sound really silly, but I'm not afraid to sound silly with you because I know this is what it's like to do business. I felt surprised at how many people showed up. I think even when I set the goal for 50, that's based on like my revenue targets, my reach targets, the impact that I want to make. But I also didn't believe I would sell 50 spots. It was really hard for me to imagine. I hoped to, and I still hope to, sell 50 spots to podcast launch prep weeks of the future, including this upcoming one. I hope to. And I know we could handle it, and I know that it would be good. But I also knew realistically, with my existing reach, hitting 50 from a marketing standpoint, hitting 50 registrations felt like a big target. Just knowing numbers, right? And so I wasn't surprised that we didn't hit 50, but every time someone registered, I was kind of surprised. And to see how many people showed up live, I felt kind of surprised, and especially how many people showed up live all week. I think it's worth it, and I want people to, but that felt surprising. When people show up for you, it feels surprising. I think there's like the kid who maybe hyper fixated on who didn't show up to my birthday party, right? Like there's that inner child wound of not expecting to be picked, not expecting to be chosen, not expecting people to want to be there with you. That still kind of comes up especially when you're starting something new and you're doing it for the first time and you're like, oh, well, will anyone want to take a bet on this with me? I know if they do, it'll be good. But like, can I convince anyone else to give me a shot before it's even ever happened? So that really was fun and surprising because we had a great show up rate. We had great retention throughout the week. We had 100% retention of people who came to the calls, who stayed for the duration of the call. That was all honestly surprising to me, but I'm so glad because I knew it was going to be good, and it was. Okay. Second thing, when you think about success beyond signups or revenue, what markers tell you this first round worked? Okay, so a lot of the stuff I've already said. I think impact, engagement, clarity, alignment. This is really much more of a big, brave business way of doing things, right? Because I think some of these more masculine, big name, big number performers, they're talking more about numbers. And if you just go off of numbers, did I make what I hoped to make? No. But that doesn't mean it wasn't successful. It totally was a great pilot program. Like, totally. Now, I'm not ignoring that I didn't meet my goals, but I also feel like I can reflect and understand why and also have a different approach for like, so what would we need to do differently next time? I think that that's where the big brave business level matters, where we're redefining success and we are thinking about the impact of our work and not just revenue, right? That's not the only point. And when we only base things on revenue, it's harmful. It's harmful to us. It's harmful to our audience. I've said many times that your revenue goals are not your clients or your customers' responsibility. I'm going to say that again. Your revenue goals are not your clients or your customers' responsibility. And I think a lot of people get that a little confused because when you go to do pricing or you go to set goals, people will tell you, reverse engineer it. You have a number in mind of what you want to make or what you need to make. And then you divide that out by like, how much would you need to make per person and how much, and that's when you have that kind of energy, that's when you start to get mad when people don't buy or when people turn over or when people go with a competitor or when your friend does whatever it is you're offering or selling but doesn't buy from you. That's where you start to have that energy because you feel like this is a really strong word, but almost a sense of entitlement to doing business. And that's really not the point, even though we have to make money to survive. And that's why it gets muddled so easily, because we do need to make money to survive, and not just to survive, but to thrive. I want to just not be in survival mode. I want to be comfortable and safe. And I want to know that my family is safe. And I want my legacy to my family to be providing security for them that lives beyond me. And that doesn't mean that I want to take from other people or I want to hurt other people or I want to be richer than anybody else or more successful than anybody else. I just want to have fucking healthcare. And I want my kids to know that a medical crisis or a diagnosis or an accident is not going to derail their basic access to existing, right? That's it. That's what I'm trying to achieve. Unfortunately, to truly have that level of security in this country in 2026, and I'm in the United States, that does look like millions of dollars that I do not have, right? And most people do not have. Most of us are living on the knife's edge in some respect. So that's where it starts to get muddled because it's like when it comes to, again, that really iffy word of entitlement, do I feel entitled to healthcare? Do I feel entitled to a roof over my head and my kids' heads? Do I feel entitled to food security? Yeah. But that's not my client or customer's fault that I don't necessarily always have that level of security. That's not their fault. And I'm also not trying to make it sound like I'm poor and broke. I actually have a ton of privilege and a ton of safety and security, especially if you're going to be like comparative about it. There's a lot of people who are a lot more knife's edge living than I am, but it's all relative, right? And so I think, yeah, anyway, that's where the big brave business of it all comes into play. Okay. What did this round teach you about how people actually need support when preparing to launch a podcast, not just what they think they need? So I think that a lot of this, I already, I've been in business for 6.5 years. So I don't think this round specifically taught me about this so much. But I will say we did learn a lot about the order in which we are structuring workshops. So one of the things, a little bit of a behind the scenes, but one of the things that my friend slash client, Sarah, told me about structuring this is she said, make sure your first workshop is something that will give them a quick win so that the person participating walks away from that first session, that first day, going, wow, this was already worth the money, right? And I've already seen a return on that investment. And I'm so eager, like if that was day one, what else is coming, right? And so not spending time in the ambiguous weeds of like concepts that are really big or anything, like give them a quick win. So we started with a naming workshop about naming your podcast, how to do that effectively, and then how to validate that you have a good name. And I thought this is really good because then on day one, you're at least going to have your podcast name locked in, right? Wrong. What ended up happening is a lot of people found out the names that they had in mind were not viable. And so what we did was caused a bit of an identity crisis for everyone on day one that then lasted a couple of days into podcast launch prep week. That was not the intention. And we did share that with participants like, oh, this was supposed to be a quick win. Like, okay, let's not. And we laughed about it. We had a good time. People were not going through this alone. But what we learned is if we do the other workshops first, 2 other workshops first, then you'll have done a lot of the work that would make coming up with an alternative name. If the name you have your heart set on is unavailable, it would make finding an alternative so much easier if you'd already had these other workshops. So rather than give everyone an identity crisis on day one, we're going to push that to later in the week. And we're going to start with other workshop pieces, other elements of planning your podcast strategy and working on your like episode content, basically what you actually want, how you want your first 6 months of episodes to be structured and what kind of topics you're going to cover and really, really all of that stuff. We're going to do that first. And that's going to make the naming part, hopefully, significantly easier. So we did learn that. We also learned that we needed to structure the timing of those workshops a little bit differently. So spending a little more time on certain subjects and certain time to be hands-on with that subject matter and a little less time on other things that maybe we had them equaled out. And so it's like, okay, actually, instead of like 50-50 across these 2 topics, we're going to spend 70% of time on one of these things and hands-on time to work on it, and then 30% of time on this other thing. So we definitely learned like how much time to spend in a group environment on those things. Whereas like when you're working with somebody one-on-one, which is the extent of what I've done with PodFox up until this point over the past 6.5 years, you can tweak those things kind of naturally based on just like what that individual person needs. So doing it with a group, we did learn that. We also learned some things about what the cohort structure may or may not need to look like following podcast launch prep week. We had a vision for what we wanted it to look like, but the timing of when we did podcast launch prep week being right before the holidays, that really didn't pan out. So that we're also not going to do podcast launch prep week in December again. We're doing it at different times of the year. So like I said, next round is going to be in February. So we did learn also December's not an ideal time for that. A lot of people, us included, ended up then taking time off over the holidays. And for me, like going into January because of moving, and a lot of people had stuff going on. They had kids at home, whatever. And they're actually looking at starting their podcasts in February and March anyway. So this round being in February, we're like, oh, this is going to make so much more sense because this is actually the time frame that a lot of people are on. I thought people were going to be on a time frame where they were going to want to kickstart the new year with a new podcast. January is a really popular time to join a gym, and it's also a really popular time to start a podcast. So I thought prep week in December made sense as people are like planning out their year. If a podcast is part of their year plan, like let's capitalize on that energy. But the holidays being right after prep week really didn't work out for anyone. So it's going to be fine because, like I said, we still had a high conversion rate, and the people who we're working with, we are excited to be working with, but they were really, I mean, we really took time off right after the momentum of prep week. And I'd love to be able to go like straight into like leveraging that momentum and excitement to be able to pour that into the podcast. So, yeah, so we learned that too. Okay. If this was a values experiment, not just a business offer, what did you learn about your own ethics and instincts through delivery? Did it feel brave, inclusive, liberatory, safe? Did the structure match your values? Yeah, I think a big part of this is that the people who were in this group, a lot of them came from this community, as in we met through the Big Brave Business world. And I think that means that we all showed up with bravery, inclusivity, safety for each other. I think that all tracked. I think that all really had to do with who was in the quote unquote container. I think that it was just I was really fortunate that the group of people who participated in prep week, yeah, we were very, very values and ethics aligned. Now, I don't think that's just luck because I've been really specific in cultivating a network of people who this is who I am. And so this is who I want to work with. This is who I attract. This is who I'm friends with and have relationships with. Yeah. So that matters to me. And I think that really showed up well with the people who participated. I think there's probably opportunities for me to be really considerate about how we can continue to protect that container as it grows, and especially when it comes to what the like group chat situation looks like, because in addition to the live sessions we also had a group kind of community space on Slack. That's an easy platform. We already use it for other things in the business. It's free, so it's fine. And we could have private conversations, we could have group conversations. And so we did all of that, and people could interact and engage with each other. People could share their contact information so they could follow up with each other after the fact. And so I think all of those things were good, but I also think there's probably opportunity for that to be improved. But I do feel like, yeah, I feel proud of how my ethics and instincts showed up in that offer. And again, I think that largely has to do with I've been in business for 6.5 years. So although the structure of this offer was different, the practice of ethics and values into my frameworks and into the way I approach things and into the community that I've cultivated, that has all been happening over the past 6.5 years. So I think that I was set up for success. Okay, so last question. Where do you go from here? How are you integrating this round's lessons into what comes next? I think I touched on a lot of this, but we do have a consultant we're working with who's been a guest on this podcast several times, Dr. Katrina Mitchum. She is a learning consultant and she has her doctorate, and she's also an award-winning textbook author about curriculum development and about how adults learn. And so she is actually consulting. She's a third-party consultant for PodFox for a couple of things that we're working on. But right now we're working on Podcast Launch Prep Week and the cohort after that. We're also going to be taking a look at like the client experience and things like that. So she is gathering formal feedback, anonymous feedback from participants, and we're going to incorporate that. So that's a big part of how we are centering integrity and, like, I guess consent is the word I'm looking for, into the iterations of what Podcast Launch Prep Week looks like. We did raise the price. We did restructure the format quite a bit. And we have brought on additional team already who is helping support the growth that this is bringing to PodFox. So there's just a lot of growth and action happening here, and that feels really, really exciting. But I think I talked a lot about like the changes that we're making, so not going to repeat all of that, but I do feel like we've been very reflective on like this is what was great and this is what we'd like to tweak and adapt and try, and then we'll see what we want to do with round 3. There definitely will be a round 3, like later. Probably going into Q4 is my guess. And it's not a guess, it's currently tentative on the calendar, but it's also going to be somewhat based on what we learn. So, yeah, I'm excited. If you are thinking about starting a podcast, I would love to support you through Podcast Launch Prep Week. Or if you know somebody who is, please send them our way. I think one of the things that is so fun about this and approaching the conversation in this way on Big Brave Business is that I get to really share with you truly the core value iterations of what we're doing. And I think that all the more reason, like, if you are drawn to the way we do business, then I think you would be really thrilled as a client if you were to work with us. I know at this point you can hire a podcast editor off of Fiverr or whatever. I mean, you can find podcast editors anywhere. We do so much more than editing, and I hope that Big Brave Business is an avenue to be able to share that. And also, even if you're either already podcasting or you're not in a place to start one, if you know someone who is, I hope that this transparency and these ethical discussions can also help build trust of integrity and character and core values and mission to see how we structure and go about the way we're doing things. So if you want to learn more about Podcast Launch Prep Week and who it's for and all of that, again, there is a link in the description in the show notes. The easiest way is podfoxmedia.com. And there's a big banner right on the front page. I almost said cover of a website. And that's the podcaster in me. Is your cover image is that's podcast speak. But anyway, so on the front page of the website, there's a big banner about Podcast Launch Prep Week. You can click that and get more information. Also, like I said, link in the description or show notes. And of course, you're welcome to DM me with any questions or with a personal recommendation or introduction to somebody who might be a good fit. And I will help them decide if they are. And just in general, be happy to know them for any introductions you want to make. Or if you want to message me directly about your own ideas and your own plans and your own podcast, I always want to talk to you about your business, about your podcast, etc. I love new friends, especially core value aligned friends. So please do. My links for my social media is also in the description or the show notes of the episode. But I'm Sarah K. Heater everywhere. And that's Sarah. And my last name is Heeter, Sarah K. Heater everywhere. And yeah, I would love to chat with you more about your ideas for a podcast. And I would love to see you in Podcast Launch Prep Week. But whether you are looking to start a podcast or not, that's not the point of Big Brave Business. We're having these conversations every single week. I do have guests on the next 2 weeks. I do have some episodes recorded, yay, with guests. And I'm going to be putting a brand new round of recordings together for the next kind of batch of recordings for the kind of end of season 3 and then going into season 4. If being a guest on the show is something that you'd like to do, whether you have been a guest or not, you can head over to bigbravebusiness.com and there is a be a guest link right there. So I need to have your information through that form. If you've already filled it out, I already have your information. No worries. You're welcome to fill it out again. There's no harm. But if you filled it out and you haven't heard anything from me, it is truly just a matter of fact that I have not had recording dates on the calendar to invite you to. It's not necessarily that I don't want to have you on the show or something. I just honestly haven't even reviewed applications very closely because I don't have recording dates on the calendar at the time of recording this, but that is going to be a top priority. I might even be able to get them up today. So by the time you're hearing this, there may be recording dates available for you to sign up for. So if you want to be a guest, head to bigbravebusiness.com. I am really looking forward to doing another round of exciting small group discussions. Those little mini minds, they're so powerful and they're so fun and connective. And so whether you've been part of them or not as a speaker, they're so fun. So I would love to have you. I would love to know you. And whether it's DMs or applying on that form, come and do that. And otherwise, I'll see you right here next week.